This is our digital story on getting enterprise-based competitive systems online. Our traditional mode of industry training had been based around the principle of enrolment, training, and assessment. This is pretty traditional in the training space. But why wasn't this working for our clients? There was a feel that the training was generic and not necessarily reflective of the business process or the job tasks that they would undertake whilst employed in business. Placing the focus on education was daunting for our learners, some of them having rather low literacy levels and some having left education early on to take up roles in manufacturing and production. The businesses themselves felt that the content wasn't engaging and lacked some wow in our training offerings. Reading and graphics were not seen to be as engaging as they could be, and the addition of pictures weren't relevant to their job task. And businesses couldn't release their employees. As I've said before, the varying literacy levels of the learners was also a concern. So we needed to develop a workable solution. Working with the East Gippsland Food Cluster, we put the focus back onto the business processes to make the training relevant, to make the material engaging, and to make it worthwhile for the business to undertake in this project. We also wanted to leverage the industry-based trainers and assessors and give them the ability to create content that was relevant to their own business. We wanted to set a standard for the presentation of any instructional content. And all the businesses involved were far too diverse for a one-size-fits-all training solution. Proposing a solution. We took the issues and the suggestions. Our idea is to base training on the business's own internal unique needs, to provide pathways for training outcomes, to recognise that the training in the workplace is just as valid as training conducted in the classroom, to allow the business to shape their training destiny, for them to have content that relates to their process and their particular ways of doing things. For this, the TAFE was to act as a partner in training and a partner in the development of the content, not necessarily the centre of it. And we wanted to turn our enrolment process and the recognition into a carrot, not the stick. So we started with standard operating procedures, simple documents that every job task in industry is based on. These are the outcomes that businesses have always felt were lacking in their training. So we set about converting those standard operating procedures to an online format. The conversion process allows us to enrich the standard operating procedures, to include engaging content, and to make them relevant to the business. Also giving us the ability to correct the issues with accessibility and literacy levels at the same time. We will then credential the training so that the training delivered in the workplace was recognised within the qualifications framework for our units of competency and ultimately into a qualification. We wanted to use the skills that the people in the business already had. We trained a business representative to be a content modifier, to take control of their own training destiny without having to lean back on the TAFE for all of this process. We want to share the role of training with our industry. We want to recognise that they have skills that the learner needs. We want to share the role of the development of the content so that changes can be made by representatives in the industry, or new SOPs can be converted in the business without the assistance from the TAFE. This was crucial to developing a partnership. Costs could be kept under control for simple changes and modifications, and TAFE would become the development partner that could be called on when business needed to enrich or increase the capacity of their training infrastructure. So we developed a collaborative model of development. The business standard operating procedures would form the basis of the training. The trainer and assessor would have a role in pulling those standard operating procedures together and working to establish a sequence. Advanced TAFE would have a role to play in training the trainers and assessors to work in this online development context, and would also be able to provide services that wouldn't ordinarily be accessible inside the business, with the aim of building e-learning based training that is relevant to the industry and the individual business, that may not be the same as the same unit of competency delivered in a differing business in the food cluster. We would then map the training to units of competency where there was a fit. We would quality assure the training to make sure that it meets all of the rules, and we would provide pathways for the learners based in the workplace to be recognised should they wish. Of course, competitive manufacturing is, as the name suggests, very competitive. There is a need for control of the content that will be developed internal to each business. The competitive systems give each grower, manufacturer and food producer their market edge, with many of the companies forming the East Gippsland food cluster being in similar fields, and that's not necessarily a pun. There was a focus on making sure that any intellectual property was kept in-house and it wouldn't be shared across businesses. So although collaborative in approach to innovation and workforce development, each business needs to retain their intellectual property. So we were asked to build in options around hosting the content at Advanced TAFE on one of our systems and providing the support needed for the trainers, assessors and employees, or to be a consultant for internal learning management system support or implementation. So how would this whole new model work in practice? We want to bring the training to the forefront, make it relevant to the business, make it accessible to the learner, and allow the recognition of workplace training in formalised VET qualifications and units of competency. We wanted to create that demand for recognition. And the key is all about the sequence. Remove the barriers to training. We adopted a MOOC-esque approach, opening up the learning to the business. To create a self-serve culture where employees felt that they could upskill themselves or go and access some PD or some training as they saw fit. They could engage in the training is a very valuable second point, that they can see the relevance of the training to what they're doing in the business. We use media-rich techniques to engage different learning styles, to give employees an overview of how machinery worked, or how the line would work, or how the overall process fits together. We wanted to create aspiration in the training so that employees that felt self-directed could go and research other job roles within the company or other processes or projects that were relevant to any SOPs. And of course, recognise the workplace. We do talk about this a lot because we saw that as being pivotal to the success and the uptake of the learning. Just remember, training is training, regardless of where you get it. Our new model was to provide the training up front. If the employee or the workplace so desired, they could then enrol in accredited units with advanced TAFE. And then they could undertake assessment to be recognised and count towards a qualification. We saw this being vital as the model based on enrolment first and a need for assessment didn't necessarily fit the workers inside the food cluster businesses. So how do we manage all this with so many key players involved? We identified the key players in the East Gippsland Food Cluster and within our own institute. Dr. Nicola Watts is currently heading up the East Gippsland Food Cluster and is responsible for preparing workplace development initiatives and workforce capability growth. The growers, manufacturers and producers that work for the businesses that make up the food cluster conglomerate also have trainers and assessors, training managers and production managers amongst many other roles in their business. How would all these interconnect? The project control group that worked at a management level would provide reporting and would receive reports of progress from the development group. The development group, comprising operational staff in the businesses in the food cluster and the TAFE, would work together to develop a product, to provide training, and therefore would push that progress back up to the project control group, which would then report back to the relevant bodies. Working with industry, there was a lot of initial support for this model. The timing was absolutely terrible. We're at peak production over the summer period, and there was less ability to release employees into training programs or to allow them to be partners in development. Businesses would take on new employees that were required to meet output requirements. Some businesses also come to the realisation that they were a little while off using e-learning. Although being initially excited and having full faith in what e-learning based in the business could do for them, they did deem that some of their employees were undertaking very low-level job tasks such as simple packing or picking, and that they may have had a smaller workforce of between 5 and 7 people, and therefore they didn't see the current value of engaging in an online training system when on the job, just in time, and just for them training was available for their employees. But out of these issues came some fairly strong success stories. Denison Food Manufacturing has never really had a lot of airtime with any of the projects that have been undertaken with the East Gippsland Food Cluster. The larger producers and manufacturers usually dominate this space and are always looking for outcomes that were more geared towards their businesses. So to see a smaller to medium business in the food cluster come to the forefront and want to engage and collaborate with advanced TAFE was very, very good. There were varied job roles in their business too that made it very attractive to apply some workplace-based e-learning training. And Denison's wanted to develop a long-term plan for their employees so that over a period of 3 to 4 years they could obtain a certificate. And they were very enthusiastic about what e-learning can bring to their business and the benefits for their employees. So how do we get started with a project like this? How do we arrange the training materials? By job function, by the production line, alphabetically. We figured the best way to do this was to analyse the end-to-end processes of a business. In this video, we looked at the production line of spinach based at one of our food growers. The initial sorting of the product to identify any product that was substandard, to filter that material to ensure quality. These were some of the irregularities we were looking for in the product. To continue to monitor the quality and sort the product to ensure that the best possible product was brought to market. To ensure that the product was washed and that the washing process was always compliant with standards. You'll notice an SOP in the background there. Here we are washing baby spinach, going in for its secondary wash here, being drained, being bathed yet again to ensure that the product is the best it can be, as clean as it can possibly be. And another quality control point where the product is tested and any substandard product is removed. In the loading and spinning phase here, the product is dried, pretty much in a washing machine, and water expelled. This is the production line so far. The product is then loaded onto one of two conveyor belts. The first line going through to be loose packed, boxed, wrapped, and sent off. You'll notice in the background a very, very big piece of machinery. This is the end of the loose pack line, and the product will be boxed from there. Going back to this junction point where the material is spun, again, the water drained out, the material is loaded onto a second belt and fed up into an automatic weigh head. This automatic weigh head is responsible for automatically bagging the produce and then sealing the bags. Another quality control step, you notice some leaf product is stuck in the bonding. After initial inspection, the product is ran through a metal detector to test for impurities and packed and sent off to market. Looking at the process end to end, we notice that most businesses utilise the same production line for multiple products. That a line could produce tortillas and then pre-made lunch packs, or even burritos in the case of one business, baby spinach or lettuce in the case of another business. So it made sense to organise the training materials into steps in the production process. Just think back to the video that I've just spoken you through, and you'll be able to identify where these particular standard operating procedures and therefore training should sit. So we arranged them as job tasks, and this also allowed for cross-training and succession should an employee be expected to fill the role of another employee. So to look again at the baby spinach line, in just a nice graphic, from loading the spinach to sorting and washing and testing, You'll notice that there are elements there that we've highlighted as quality control points to ensure the quality of a product, and critical control points to ensure the safety of the product. As we move through the straining and washing and sorting processes, the spinning, finally the loading to the loose product line or off to the pre-packaged line. By looking at the process like this, the SOPs could be accessed. Any SOPs that don't exist could be developed, and they could then be enriched. We will then store them on the LMS in a way that they could be accessed per line or job task. Here in the burrito production line, you can have a look for yourself and see the workplace procedures that are undertaken. Grouping the product, there's a cooking process. Here we would insert or have inserted a voiceover at a quality control point. Another procedure, loading and sorting burritos and lining them up one by one to be packaged. Makes you think twice about your food, doesn't it? You can see them being wrapped there, which is yet another standard operating procedure. Here we're able to show the production process end to end. We can highlight any requirements of the machine, including safety requirements and buttons, and we can do this in an environment that is free of excessive noise. Of course, there's less risk to the employee as well. But what about the learning styles of our learners? Each SOP needs to meet the learner needs, so each piece of training needs to adhere to the same guidelines that we would use in a vet training environment. We need to accommodate visual learners, people who like to look at what they're learning about. We need to provide reference materials to enable the learner to refer back later, maybe a printable sheet or perhaps even a recipe. We need to look at the overall process, and using media-rich materials enables us to explain to the worker, who is the learner, how vital the role they play in the overall production process is. The job process that they'll be undertaking in that overall process, and perhaps things like recipes. On one particular line that produces burritos, it may produce Jenny Craig healthy choice meals next. So there are a particular set of cooking instructions. Or for meat pies. The possibilities are endless.